This story takes place in the mid-90s, a time before widely used cell phones and GPS. My two best friends and I, freshly able to drive, decided we would head out on a Saturday to a water park in southern Missouri, about a 3-hour drive from our hometown in northwest Arkansas. We had never been there before and just used road maps to get there. We had a pretty fantastic time, but as the sun started to reach the tree line, we thought it best to head home. It's about 7 o'clock and we miss a turn, but my friend Paul, who was navigating, said not to worry, another turn was coming up and we would get there just as fast. The next turn we took us from detoured to completely lost. By 8 o'clock, we're on a road that seemed to be lacking in informative road signs and zero lights. We finally see a gas station and are relieved to get some directions as well as some gas. My friend Taylor and I go inside while Paul pumps gas. We come inside and a very friendly old man, who looked to be in his early 60s, gives us a very large grin and says,
"Well, hello there."
It was very Foghorn Leghorn-esque. He looked like an extreme hillbilly, but was very pleasant. We explained that we were needing gas and wanted to fill up. He explained that he was about to shut down for the night, but would be happy to oblige us. He then said something that I'll never forget.
"You have to make haste though. Tonight is buffer night."
Taylor and I looked at each other and shared an awkward look. We asked him again if he could point out our location on the road map. While he was finding it, two people entered the shop from the back and called out for the old man. He said he was up front. The two approached us, a man and a woman, and at first they looked confused. Then, as though hit with an epiphany, they smiled. They asked the old man, "Are these the guests tonight?" He shot them a look and said,
"No, these are some lost children."
The way he said children caused the hairs on my neck to stand up. I'm not sure why. They looked at us and said, "The three of you should make haste, because tonight is buffer night." Two things scared the shit out of me right then. The first being, how did they know about Paul pumping gas out front when they came from the back? And the second being that they repeated the old man verbatim. We clarified the directions to get back on the main highway and paid for the gas without waiting for change. Taylor and I booked it out of the gas station to find Paul already in the passenger seat. We jumped in the car and took off. Before we can even say anything, Paul told us about how three men from across the street stood under a tree just watching him. He waved, but they didn't move a muscle. We just drove as fast as we could until we got back to the highway. To this day, I will still have a nightmare every so often about that gas station and what my imagination has twisted buffer nights into being. I was driving in rural areas in New England, near the borders of Vermont and Massachusetts, so I'm not sure which one I was in. It was late. Well, okay, so late it was actually early. And there was fog. Dense fog. Like Silent Hill levels of fog. And like an idiot who dies in the opening scene of a horror movie, I'm driving on back roads. First, my headlight just up and goes out, and I can't use high beams because of the fog. I'm in the middle of nowhere. I haven't seen a house or a town in a long time. My car starts making noise. Check engine light comes on. So, I pull over, and there's nothing around except fields and fog and dark. Creepy as hell. I gamely look at the engine. I can fix electronics, not engines. I tighten all the things I know. Now, the car won't start at all. So, I'm in the dark, in the middle of nowhere, on the side of the road. Because of the natural rules of how things work, my cell phone has no service at all. It's like one big cliche. But I'm not stupid enough to go wandering the roads right now, so I recline my seat and decide to take a nap for a couple of hours until the sun comes up. I wake up and the sun is coming up and the fog is going away. And I'm on the main street of a tiny town, parked in front of what looks like the Bates Motel. There are houses everywhere. It was the creepiest feeling. I was so sure that I was off in the woods. Was there not a light on in any house all night? There was a service station 50 yards up the road. I walked up to it and talked to the guy, who looked perfectly normal. He walked over to my car and asked me to try to start it. And of course, it did. It fucking turned over right away. And both headlights were working. I drove on. I never got the name of the little village, and I couldn't find it on a map. I always felt like I was in this big setup for a horror movie that just didn't pan out. There is a town right near me in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, Lincoln Way, and Clairton PA, where a whole street full of families disappeared overnight back in the 70s. Everything, bills, food, clothes, etc., was left behind. No trace of them to this day. You can go onto Google Maps and look it up. The houses are abandoned and almost closed off from the rest of the town. A friend had a recording studio in his parents' house in Colerain, Massachusetts. We were up late, getting high and recording, and for whatever reason, pot logic, we took his 4-track out to the barn to record ourselves singing. On the tape, there's the take of 2 of us singing, and then there's a pop. We stop and start laughing all of a sudden, because in real life, the single light bulb in the barn had suddenly burst and surprised the hell out of us. We hauled everything back inside and went to listen to the takes and add more. But it's Western Massachusetts and everything is haunted here, so, of course, on a separate track, we find a faint voice. New tape, unrecorded area. As we're singing on track 2, a frantic voice is on track 3, quiet but clear enough. It says, "I got away. I got away. I'll show you." And as soon as it says, "I'll show you," that's when the light bulb burst. 18 years later, it still gives me the chills to think about. That night, we left all the lights on. It was too goddamn creepy. There were high tension lines nearby. It wasn't unusual to pick up AM radio on the tape, but on an untouched track? And such a terrified voice coming from the local oldie station at 1 a.m.? My wife and I live in an apartment complex in mid-Michigan, and our neighbors have mostly kept to themselves for the 1.5 years we've been here. Apart from Linda. Linda is the epitome of a sweeter older lady. She lives with her husband and adult son, and very much enjoys gardening. We were introduced to Linda almost immediately when she came over to introduce herself last summer and asked us to water her veggies while her and her family were away for the weekend. Since then, she frequently would talk to us and even come over to ring our doorbell and offer us some food from her garden. Around this past December, she got a big white van and sold her old minivan. She would make conversation as she packed it, but was always very vague. She only told us she was going on a trip, and when we made a comment, I can't recall what, she said she would have to be sure to be safe, as a woman traveling across the country all alone. She never told us her destination or why. Then she went without saying anything. She was gone through winter, and her husband and son stayed in the house. Spring has come, and she recently returned. Or at least something has. Her beloved garden hasn't been prepped, and she has not spoken or even looked at us. I've seen her out shopping, walking to her house from her van, all points where, before, she would have said something. She doesn't even seem to notice us. My wife and I began joking that she was a Russian spy or a doppelgänger, but I'm really starting to wonder about the doppelgänger. Not only has she not spoken to us, I haven't heard her speak at all in the months she's been back. On top of that, there's strange banging from their walls. They've always been very quiet, or will let us know if they're doing work. And what's more is, I think she loves that garden more than her family, yet it's been all but abandoned. I haven't even seen her near it, which is saying a lot, as I'm home almost all the time. Her face no longer seems to show emotion, and it's just weird. It just feels wrong. Has anyone else ever experienced this?